My name is Aaron Wileman. I've actually been working in brand integration and brand placement for a long time, but not so much in film. I've spent about 8 years now working in film and had a number of different experiences, but I very much view the relationship between brands and film from the perspective of the brand. And that's why I can, I suppose, bring a little bit of different insight into the way that brands think about the utilization of film. So what we're going to go through today,
Sigue sin servir el
not
clicker.
having much luck with technology today.
Nos ayudan, sigue sin servir el...
So I've got an agenda today which is really going to look at the different types of placement, the different types of brand tie-ins that you can do, and how that can lead to a deeper relationship of a brand partnership. Thank you. That brand partnerships go beyond what a placement is. So if we look at what is a brand partnership, brand partnerships can begin with a product tie-in. They can begin with a product placement. They don't necessarily need to involve a visual element of a placement within a film. But the partnership goes a little bit further. The partnership goes towards the element of integrating cross-promotion, integrating communication, integrating engagement, and when I say engagement, how you engage with a particular audience, and integrating experiential elements into it. So how do you actually utilize things such as event cinema to provide a better environment for your brand clients that you'd integrate in film? Okay, there we go. So let's talk about the anatomy of a placement. Now many of you will know what that is. That it's the integration of it into a dialogue, it's the appearance of it either in the foreground or background of a scene, it's the involvement of it in the contextual usage of it, or it's even to a level of storyline integration where you're integrating the product into the storyline. Brand partnerships go a little bit further because what they're looking at is they're looking at how you can actually facilitate a storytelling element of the brand. Because ultimately, you as filmmakers, you're telling a story. Brands themselves and brand marketers are also telling a story. And at times, there's the opportunity for the two of them to meet. Not sure how many of you have seen this film, Interns. It is a really good example of where the complete and utter story, oh, look at that, of a brand is actually heard through the film. Brand never paid to place in this film, but what it did was you got a very good sense of what Google was through the film. They built a partnership around this that actually communicated it much more strongly. So, why would you do brand placement? You do brand placement because creatively, sometimes you need to. Sometimes you have a car in a scene that you need to utilize. Sometimes you have a product that you've built into a dialogue or built into an action that actually helps you facilitate your own storytelling. And in that respect, creatively, you're actually requiring to do it. So it enhances your own filmmaking ability. Why else would you do it? Financially. Particularly here in Mexico, we'll talk about it a little bit more, but you've got a real incentive here to get financial gains through integrating products into your film as a partnership. Those particular integrations, I tend to view them as revenue sources as opposed to funding. Now, I'll touch on that a little bit later because it's actually interesting. About an example, I'll show you about what I mean and why we look at them as a revenue source as opposed to a funding coverage, because it is something that can be applied within independent production. Finally, legally, if you are putting a brand in a film, putting a product in a film, you have to get sign-off from the brand to use the product. Many of you who've done that before will know that. I'll say one thing very simply. It's much easier to deal with a brand's marketing team than it is with their legal team. If you have that conversation with them beforehand, with their marketing team, the marketing team is the team that has the dollars to spend. They're the ones that are going to advocate for you to the legal team. If you have to deal with their legal team, it's going to cost you money in legal fees. So always better to speak to their marketing team, speak to them beforehand if you're planning on doing it, even if you're not seeking money from them. So let's look at the history of product placement, a couple of examples. I'm going to talk to them in the context of big studio films. Studio films are very good at doing brand partnerships and brand relationships, but I'm going to try and highlight ways that you can apply that to your own independent productions. Okay? So, let's start with one of the biggest. This has often been referred to the Olympics of product placement. James Bond is a $16 billion brand alone. So as a franchise with 25 films, they are able to command very big dollars. Each time they do a film, they command around $200 million worth of brand partnership revenue. Many of those brand partnerships are not actually product placement driven. Most of them are driven through an entire partnership arrangement that is licensing and merchandising arrangements around it. Take Heineken, for example, which was one of the ones there. I think they paid $40-odd million to be a part of Skyfall. Got a lot of bad press about it. Bad press, it's press, so it's coverage for the brand. They probably also spent another $200 million activating that globally because they sell their product in around 85 countries of the 170 that this is going to. Now, if you have a look at this graphic, it's probably a little hard to see. You can see a whole heap of stuff here from, sunglasses to cars to fragrances and so forth. Take the fragrance, for example. You didn't see the fragrance in the film. You can't smell the fragrance in the film, but it's a brand partner. Again, it's a tie-in and a communication-driven activity that actually you can start to think about, particularly when you've got money coming in and using that brand. Now, we'll talk about the power of doing that as a brand tie-in, because for filmmakers, there's the opportunity for that to be communications-driven, and when you have a brand to a value like this, you're actually going to leverage from their audience as much through their communication activity, but we'll explore that a little bit later. Here's another good example. This is one often reported in the press as Reese's Pieces gave Steven Spielberg $1 million to do this placement. That's wrong. Reese's Pieces didn't give Steven Spielberg $1 million. What they did is they committed to spend $1 million on advertising Reese's Pieces and that E.T. eats Reese's Pieces. By doing that, Steven Spielberg got his film marketed for him. Now, to give you a little bit of an insight into that, you have a look at the Facebook likes as just one measure for E.T. versus the Facebook likes for Reese's Pieces. Now, Spielberg's a fairly big name, you would have to say. So you'd think he's got a few followers. E.T. has 1 million people that like it on Facebook. Reese's Pieces has 13 million. So the benefit for Spielberg in this instance was the fact that instead of him trying to build an audience, by partnering with Reese's Pieces, getting them to market on his behalf, they were pushing it to their audience and their install base already. That would drive people back to the film. So often these partnerships, while this one is financially driven as well, they can be driven for that cross-promotional element. The Smurfs. The Smurfs. This particular one's an interesting one. Does anybody know how much the Smurfs cost to make? Anyone? No? $105 million it cost to make this film. Before they shot the first scene, they had raised $150 million in product placement revenue and brand partnership revenue. What that meant, you've got a film you haven't yet made, you've already made $45 million. Okay, apply that to your small productions. You've got a film worth $300,000. If you start thinking about, at the very beginning of your film, how you can enable those brand partnerships, you can potentially start to look at brand relationships as a revenue source. So straight away, those partnerships, when you're building your business models around your film, instead of looking and saying, we're going to cut our funding on our film and we're going to cut our costs by getting brands involved, you start looking at it as a revenue stream and saying, we'll make money. Your investors will go, okay, I'll give you a little bit more. So it affects everything, your business model, all those types of things. Now, with this particular example, what I want to do is talk more from the brand's reason for being involved. When the brand Ray-Bans got involved in risky business, they were selling 18,000 Wayfarers a year. They were about to cut that product line because it was not profitable for them, they weren't selling enough, and they took a risk. Interestingly, risky business. But they took a risk with risky business, and they basically placed the product in risky business. The 12 months following that, they sold 360,000 units. 5 years following that, they're selling at 1.8 million a year. So you can see from a brand's perspective, there's a power in finding the right vehicle through which to place their product. To give it a context, now the beauty of this is it appears on the poster, but Ray-Bans now have a very strong integrated policy of getting into film. They use an agency, they place in about 360 films a year, okay? You'll see everything there from Madonna to Will Smith to DiCaprio, our latest Oscar winner, wearing Ray-Bans because they are everywhere, because it works for them. And if you can use models and examples like this to understand why does a brand get involved, what's their objective, it will help you in structuring what we're going to talk about a little bit later, which is the value that you can add back to a brand. Another example, more recent, but it's one that I've spoken to a few producers about while I've been here this week. When you're looking at brand placement, don't look at where you are locally, where you're filming locally. In this particular instance, The Martian is a great example. It's a US film, US production, that was actually shot in Jordan, right? So there's a placement that Jordan has. They did a lot of promotion around, I think the tagline that the Tourism Commission Jordan used was, landscapes that are off this planet. See where The Martian's shot? But this product here is a Vivo telephone. Vivo don't sell very many telephones in the United States. It's a Chinese telephone. And they knew because there was going to be a line of, I suppose, storyline around the Chinese Space Agency within this, that it might appeal to the Chinese market. So they went to Chinese brands instead of going to US brands to place a Chinese brand in the film. In that respect, they're able to look cross borders, and it's what I've counseled a lot of producers on, is look cross borders. Think about who might be interested in your film rather than just saying, I'm producing a Mexican production in Mexico that might appeal to other countries in Latin America. Think about other products that maybe are outside Latin America or outside Mexico, for example. Now, here we talk about good and bad examples, because I'm going to be honest and say bad examples, they don't really affect the brand because it's press, but they affect the film, quite frankly. This is a good example. This car did not exist before the first Transformers. And when they put this car in the film, they made the version of the car for Transformers 1. They got so much demand for the car that they had to actually run it as a production line. They sold 60,000 units of the car in the first year, in that color. Fast forward to Transformers 4. Guess who designs the car now for Chevy? It's Michael Bay. Michael Bay, the director of Transformers, actually designs the Chevy car, and Chevy built it to his spec. This particular example, same film. Now, who runs away from a Transformer and needs a can of milk while they're running away from a Transformer? Right? Really poor integration. I think it affects the film, it affects the integrity of the film. The point being here is that don't accept every brand and every brand's desire just to get a little bit of money. And if you are having a brand that wants to force themselves into your film, talk to them early, because then you can actually make it a little bit better than this integration. Again, I can't imagine anybody running away from a Transformer and wanting to drink milk. So, as I mentioned, not everything is based around on-screen product placement as a partnership. I hope everybody's familiar with this film, Imitation Game. Alan Turing did a lot of writings, and he did a lot of work with universities prior to what he did here with I suppose, the British Secret Service at the time during the war. What's happened around this film is a number of partnerships with universities and publishers that have relaunched his writings. So while they don't appear in the film, what happens is we're able to reignite the sales of a product that's maybe 50 or 60 years old through the mention and what the work of this man was doing. So look at your partnerships beyond just the products. Look into other ways that you can potentially create a relationship with the brand. Again, Gillette is a massive sponsor of the Avengers franchise. If you watch really closely in the Age of Ultron, you'll see an old beat-up sign in a garage when they're looking at an old vehicle. And that's the only time it appears. But apparently, our future shaving requirements are being influenced and inspired by the Avengers, which is where their marketing campaigns come about. Likewise, Jurassic World. Jurassic World, Barbasol did not appear in this film, but in the very first film of Jurassic Park, it was an integral piece of the storyline. It was how he was smuggling the DNA of the dinosaurs out of the environment. So they've come back to a 22-year-old tie-in to resell the products. Again, doesn't appear in the film, so it's an off-screen opportunity. Likewise, does anybody recognize this? No, I didn't expect you would. This is the inside production warehouse of Budweiser. Budweiser is a firm that does a massive amount of placement. They have a warehouse full of product, everything from neon signs to that you can go and get and put in your film. They are one of the brands that says, yeah, we get the value. That's their production facility. That shot is taken from Star Trek Into Darkness, where that particular placement, because how can they do a Budweiser placement within a Star Trek film? It's impossible, right? So what they've done is they've offered up their facility as a way of creating a tie-in so that they could communicate as a partner of the film, leverage from the audience. A great example. How many people in Star Wars wear coverall makeup, right? But interestingly, because we got a female lead in Star Wars this time around with Daisy Ray, that was a mechanism for them to go to Coverall Girl as Star Wars and make a partnership on them at a communications level. Now, Star Wars and Disney, I don't think they need any communications support, but they're a company that doesn't take any risks, that for sure. So they made a massive amount of partnerships. I think December, everywhere you turned, there was Star Wars cake mix, there was Star Wars batteries, there was Star Wars CoverGirl makeup. So, here we go. Is it possible for an independent producer to do what these guys are doing? And absolutely. You just need to be really clever about it. You need to think about the practices and the approaches that these guys have applied to their studio-based films. Now, the big thing is that they have a massive marketing engine within their organizations that they push and they utilize to make these brand relationships. That's obviously something you probably don't have in your teams, so you need to think creatively and innovatively about how you approach some of these things. So what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to give you some insights and some ideas about how to potentially approach that. Come up with ways to add extra value to the brand relationship that you might want to create. So let's have a look at some independent film examples that have done it. This film, budget of $1.5 million. It's a documentary actually about product placement, right? And his objective in the film, Morgan Spurlock, if you know Morgan Spurlock, was to try and fund the film entirely through product placement revenue while he talked about product placement. He achieved that. But it's worth watching the film because he learned some very strong examples. At one stage, he rang Abercrombie and Fitch and said, "We're looking for a partner." And he says in the film, the marketing director there laughed at me. And he said, "Why are you laughing?" And she said, "Well, do you really want me to tell you?" He said, "Yeah, sure." So apparently this marketing director launched into him and said, "Well, look, you're not Abercrombie and Fitch material. We don't want you wearing our clothes. You're ugly. You've got a bad attitude. You really don't match who our style is." The important point is don't waste your time going to brands that are not going to match your needs within the film and their needs as a brand to reach audiences. He rang 600 companies. Most of the companies gave him that response because he didn't do his research beforehand. So he wasted a lot of time and he only got 15 out of 600 on board for the film. So do your research beforehand is the key thing that I would say there. Gascoigne. If anybody knows Paul Gascoigne. Paul Gascoigne is a famous footballer from Italy, 1990, played for the English football team. This was a documentary that was released last year. Documentary, again, how do you place in a documentary? In this particular instance, the placement or the partnership in that instance was a hotel in the United Kingdom that wanted to bring film people and football people into the hotel. They're their two target audiences. And when we found that out, we were able to make a relationship, because we did the placement on this, able to make a relationship between the film and the hotel that brought people like David Beckham into their hotel, brought people like Wayne Rooney and Paul Gascoigne into their hotel. So they were able to then communicate, we have an interest from the football community. We have an interest from the film community. So again, it's not natural sometimes to see it's a film about football. Maybe we go to football clubs. In this instance, no. We looked at the context of the way that the film was being shot, what they needed on the film. We looked into their budgets, where their biggest cost expenses would be, and looked at ways to minimize their cost in that respect. Anybody know this film? Piku? No? It's Indian film, not a Bollywood film, but a normal, just a film out of India. Has one of the highest level of brand placements around at the moment. Their principal sponsor in it is actually a tyre manufacturer. Right? The interesting thing is there's a road trip in the middle of it, which is why the guy's standing there holding the car. Again, thinking differently about where your brand partnerships might sit is critical to understanding that. Now, what these guys did that I think was very powerful was in their partnerships with the brands, they didn't just think about within the film and the communication about the film. They contracted with every single one of the actors to also endorse the brands while the film was being screened. So the actors were out there doing the work as well for the brands. Now, if you can have those conversations early with your talent and get them on board to endorsing your brand, you're giving them extra value. Right? And that's what it's all about. You need to give extra value to your brands. Final one, short film. Is it possible to place in short film? Absolutely. Jaguar funded this film from start to finish. Now, if you look at the title there, the name that's producing this is Ridley Scott, so it's a little bit easier for Ridley Scott. But we've worked, my experience, I've worked on a short film that was actually going to be used more for promoting the feature film to the industry. A lot of filmmakers do that. So they'll shoot a short that will tell the story of the feature that they're going to make as a way of raising finance, getting sales and distribution interest, and so forth. We were aware of that, and we're able to build our strategy for finding a brand based upon brands that were looking for that. So think about this instance. Goes to the film industry, and high net worth individuals see it as an investment strategy. They're the two audiences of that short film. In that instance, what we needed to look for was a brand who wanted to break into film, who wanted to get more exposure in film, who wanted film people seeing their brand. And at the same time, because it was, in the finish, it was a handbag brand that sold handbags for 25,000 euros. It was also a brand that appealed to high net worth individuals, because not everybody can buy a handbag worth 25,000 euros. And in fact, my wife was at the time saying, I really like that one. I said, yeah, where are you going to park it? Because it's the same price as our car. So it's interesting to make sure that you understand what's the intent and distribution of the film, and then look for brands that match that. Okay, let's talk about brands. Every brand is different, as you can see. Their branding, the way that they approach the world, what they see as value, and the key element in this is to understand what that is. And that's where the research element that I talked about earlier comes into it. Understanding who you are going to target. There's no point, and many of you have heard me say this that I've spoken to, there's no point when you're doing a film about some guys riding their Harleys on a motorcycle trip to talk to BMW or Ducati about their motorcycles, because that's not the same target audience. Right? Ultimately, you need to really think about the values of the brands. Now, let's talk about the values of the brands. The key values of the brands is that they want to be differentiated from their competitors. So you need to find vehicles that enable that differentiation to take place, that differentiate them in their audiences, that differentiate them in the context, that differentiate them in the engagement with their own community, their own customers. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as well later. One, I suppose, big area is giving them an experiential side of things, giving them the facility to get closer to their own clients. Now, that's where we talk about things such as event cinema, okay? Where you can invite them along as sponsors of your event when you're launching your premiere. Give away tickets, give away exclusive experiences. They're the type of values that, what I've seen in the past, that brands are actually seeking for. If they can, I'll give you a perfect example. American Express. American Express is a big brand that has a part of their membership base. They say to people, we can give exclusive experiences. Why not one of the exclusive experiences be that they can be an extra in your film? How many people want to be an extra? So let's talk about the mechanics of placement. Okay, you've got these two mechanisms that I've talked about. Prop supply, product placement, brand integration, brand entertainment. That's all driven by some form of on-screen activity. And in that respect, we're going to talk about those a little bit more, but what you're looking at is really how you build a story around the integration of that product into the film. On an off-screen perspective, I've talked about licensing, event cinema, merchandising, experiential, and we'll get into those in detail. So let's just have a quick look. Prop supply. In your film, you are going to need props. Every film probably has a prop handler. Every film has a production designer that runs around getting bits and pieces and so forth. Often you might borrow, beg, steal, or even buy the stuff. This is, you'll be familiar, it's a shot from House of Cards. House of Cards is full of props, full of partnerships, that sort of stuff. The interesting thing here is that audiences will see everything in a shot, good or bad, they see everything. And in some instances, they will connect to it. So here's an important point. Be very aware of what props you put in shot. And we'll talk about this a little bit later, because with the way the world's connectivity is today, people will search out that. For example, the map on the wall there. Somebody might think, my husband likes maps, I want to buy him that map, right? Not me, but yeah. They will need to find out what that is, and we'll talk about that later. So be very wary, obviously, of what's in your shot and where you're getting it from, and capture that material. We talk about the next level, which is that paid placement level. It's where you're really bringing the product to the fore in many respects. It's giving the opportunity for the brand and the story of the brand to be told in a little bit more detail. This is obviously a bit of a tongue-in-cheek example, but again, that's where you start to cross that border of how do I ask the brand for money? What do I have to give to get that monetization back from them? This goes even a step further, integrating the brand into the film. Making the brand or the product a character in your film. Wilson. Do you know they still sell, 20 years down the track, they still sell a Castaway branded Wilson volleyball. So we can talk about the longevity of some brands' placements within film and the value that it can be to a brand. You can use examples like that, all right? And it's very powerful for the brand to know that. For example, how many people go to New York and will stand outside Tiffany's window, all right? What drives that? Okay, and that's a 60-year-old film. So let's talk about monetizing placements, okay? How do we monetize it? For me, my experience... Yep, here, okay. This morning I was just mentioning to Hugo, and it's not an integration thing, well, it is actually integrated now when you think about it, but since Leonardo DiCaprio won the Oscar last week, the sales of the spinning top from Inception have gone through the roof to the point that they can't manufacture enough. Now that's a 6 or 7 year old film. And again, talks to the longevity of it, and that people are revisiting the purchase of product because of the elevation of an actor, because of the association with that actor and the Oscars. And it's a small prop. Now, that was done by a designer. Here's an interesting story. It was done by a designer who designed a few pieces for the film. He then, over the last couple of years, has run a Kickstarter campaign because he had no way of manufacturing them in mass scale. He ran a Kickstarter campaign to raise the money for the $35,000 machine that he needed to actually make the tops. That machine can't make enough of the tops in the last week to feed the actual demand for those tops. So we talk about monetizing. Right? Monetizing is really, for me, about that extra value that you bring. So we'll whip through what that extra value equates to. We talk about partnership. Right? Partnership is really about how you understand what your brand is looking for. Right? Understand the story that they're telling. Understand their brand value, their brand proposition. Okay? You have to do that work if you really want to have a brand partner on board. You can't just turn up to a brand and say, give me product and give me money and communicate for me. You need to know what they're doing and why they're doing it. One of the strongest areas is to package things up. When you're adding extra value, package it up. Make it a sponsorship deal. I spent 20 years looking at sponsorship packages that came from media providers. Because I sat on the brand side. I looked at these. I looked at everything from sports sponsorships of football teams to sponsorships at events to hosted activities to other media. The key things that you need to look at in that context are how do you achieve and provide all of these elements that are around this wall here for the brand? A brand, for example, is measuring everything that they do, right? In a way that the film industry doesn't even start to imagine. They use terms such as ROI, CPM, CPV, CPC, right? This is what you compete with when you start to try to monetize it. You're competing with where the brand will spend its money on something else. Not whether it's a bad idea that you have, a good idea or what. It's what options the brand has. So you need to start to think in the terms that the brands think. So for example, many brands are going down a path of using digital marketing. Now, digital marketing is very easy to measure because it's a click per view rate, click per thousand rate, a view per thousand rate, all of these type of terms. If you can start to look at what your potential reach is for your film, for your social media, for your relationships through your distributors, and with your talent relationships, you can start to give a figure that gives the brand a comparative value to what they will get from your film versus what they will get from another. I'll give you some more ideas. This is a UK figure. To advertise a 30-second slot during primetime television in the United Kingdom costs about 12 pounds per 1,000 views, okay? And the television networks charge based upon that. So think about that if you've got a brand that's integrated into your storyline for 40 minutes, right? I've got a film at the moment where we've integrated the car, and the car is a character, and it spends 40 minutes on screen. Imagine the power for a brand and the value that they would have to pay to get 80 units at 1,000 views a unit. All of a sudden, that's an astronomical figure for them. And if you can start to sell to them in that term and say, well, the value of you giving us 10 grand, 20 grand, 30 grand equals this type of cost per view, then you're giving them the figures that they need to assess the opportunity. Very important to know that. So let's look at cross-promotion. Again, I don't think Batman or Superman are going to be eating Doritos in this. I haven't seen it yet, but I don't think they're going to be eating Doritos. But here is where the power comes in of the brand relationship. As I said with E.T., you've got E.T. that Reese's Pieces promoted E.T. on behalf of Steven Spielberg. Here, if you can make relationships where they promote on your behalf, you're doing the communication work. Now, the beauty of this is then you can go back and make yourself much more attractive to your sales agents, to your distributors, because you've got a brand communicating on your behalf. And you can be saying, we've got a marketing campaign that's going to support us that's not related to our film, but it's going to drive back to our film. Okay? It's a very powerful thing that's a little bit hidden when we talk about brand relationships. Additionally, on this particular one, licensing. As many of you sign over films to distributors and so forth, you might sign over the licensing agreements, right? That they can license the content or whatever. Make sure that your relationship with the distributor is actually going to utilize that licensing sign-off that you give to them, right? Because you may be able to continue to make brand relationships on some of the IP from the film, some of the IP of the characters, those type of things. And if your distributor or your sales agent is not actually utilizing them, then it's just lost revenue for you. So make sure that if they want it, they're going to do something and demand what they're going to do, please. Let's talk about merchandising, which is kind of related. Here, Batman, big film. You merchandise anything. You can put it on T-shirts, on cups, on radios, on underwear. You can do this in independent film. Here's a film, $400,000 to make, okay? It became a cult, and it has everything from T-shirts, vote for Pedro, to Pedro dolls, to radios that they communicated in that are branded with Pedro, right? This independent production company did all this themselves, right? So that's why I say don't give away your IP, because you can start to do merchandising relationships, whether you go to a company that's going to create these products or whether you partner with one of your brands that does this and they do it on your behalf. You're giving them that licensing content to do that. Charities. Many of you work with charities. Many of you work on storylines that have a socially driven message. These are very good partnerships for that communication partnership. Charities very, very, very rarely give money, okay? Because they're trying to seek money. There are some instances very rare ones where I've seen charities give money. I've seen one charity that's an organ donor charity, trying to encourage people to donate organs, fully finance a film that was a horror film. Very risky take. It was a horror film about people who were getting kidnapped and having their organs cut out. The message that charity used behind that was, don't let this become reality. Give your organs and nobody will get stolen or kidnapped and have their organs harvested. So you will get interesting charities that may have a risk-adverse nature, but it's very rare. The power of this is obviously their communication base. Artists. Many of you use artists in film. This is again where I say, think about it creatively, try and be innovative in the way that you set up a partnership. Many of you may have a character that's a painter in the film, and he's painting maybe a piece of artwork that's critical to the storyline. If he's doing that, why not think about creating a partnership, a three-way partnership in this instance, between you as the film, him as the artist, and bring a gallery on board. In that particular instance, what you can potentially do is create an environment where when you launch the film at the premiere, you also organise with the gallery to launch and showcase the artist's artwork. And in that respect, you can say to the artist, give us the piece of art for free, we'll use that and we'll auction the art at the gallery. So we'll bring the gallery's audience in, and we'll then also communicate at the gallery about the film premiere. So you see, you start to build the way that you can amplify your communication. Again, another area where you can add extra value is through social talent. Many of you probably use social talent as in your films today. If you don't, I encourage you to start looking at a way to do it. There are social bloggers, vloggers, tweeters on everything that does with film. So you can set up one or more relationships with social talent to communicate on your behalf, and again, it becomes a stronger thing that you can go to your brands with. So let's look at that in a little bit more detail. You have a makeup team. There are thousands of women out there that blog about the best way to do makeup, right? So get one of them on board to backstage report about how the makeup's being done for the film, how it's different to doing makeup normally, right? Many of these bloggers have 1 million followers, right? You can start having somebody else blog about your film in that behalf. Brilliant. You can bring on one of them might want to act in the film. Brings in a different storyline. You might have one that's a fashion blogger. She can talk about all the fashion. You might have one that's a travel blogger who can talk about the locations. And all of a sudden, you can have millions of people hearing about your film through a mechanism that's not being utilised very much today. I have one film, they're using comic talent on their film. You know, people who do these silly vines for 7 seconds and laugh at themselves with them. He's got around 25 million people who are following the 7 talent that he's going to use in this film. So straight away, he can go to his distributor and make himself look more attractive to his distributor because he's saying, I have 25 million people who are already being told about this film. Collaborative marketing. Does anybody know what collaborative marketing is? Okay, so let me explain it a little bit. Collaborative marketing is ultimately where you are trying to get a third-party person to market on your behalf. We'll get into this in a little bit more detail, but a great way to explain it is you take your film and you get your audience to market that film on your behalf. It's viral activity. But true collaborative marketing actually incentivizes that person through advocacy to market on your behalf. It may be that for every 100 people that they bring to the cinema to come and watch your film, you give them 10 tickets. Right? You can set up any number of programs around that. I'm going to explore one a little bit later that we come back to that discussion on making brand partnerships a revenue source. So let's look at this. We'll start straight away on it, actually. The social properties that you might have around your film are a great way to get a direct connection between your film and the brand's websites and so forth as a sales channel builder for the brand. Now, many brands are sold through e-retail sites. So when you look at e-retail sites like these guys, Rakuten, Amazon, eBay, they have what they call affiliate programs, meaning that if you are driving something out of a social property, driving something out of a website to their website, and the customer purchases from that website, they will pass you a portion of the revenue. So let's play that out for film. Come back to that scene from House of Cards where there's an iPad on the table. Somebody thinks, I want to buy an iPad. They look at your website. You've got a link there or a photo that shows that scene with the iPad and a link direct to Rakuten's website. That person clicks on that link, purchases the iPad. You get somewhere between 1% and 5% of the value of that product as a revenue stream. Now, if you start to advocate that and build that much stronger, those revenue streams, quite frankly, can become bigger than what you get out of your distribution revenue streams. And that's where many web series content producers are actually seeing much more power out of that than they are out of distributing their content. So it's an important thing to think of. There's a number of websites out there that help enable that, right? Because to be an affiliate, sometimes you need to get signed off. It's getting harder and harder to become an affiliate. And that's why what I would encourage you to do is to partner with sites, and there's a number of these out there. This is Cameo, that actually document and catalog the products that have appeared in a film, and they're used by what actor. In this particular instance, this is a revenue sharing one, so producers who provide the content to this one will get a portion of the revenue stream that the site gets back from the affiliate networks. What that means is you don't have to go out and build those affiliate relationships yourself. You can just partner with a site like this, provide the content and the information about which products, and if products sell because of your film, you'll get a revenue stream back. Okay? A number of sites like this, not all of them share the revenue streams though. So here's where I want to talk about special programs, and I'm going to get Hugo to speak a little bit more. But in places like the Ukraine and in Mexico, there's special programs that are set up to support brand involvement in film. Incentivize them through tax implications and so forth. But I'll let Hugo explain a little bit more for the Mexican side of things to give better context.
Bueno, aquí les hablo un poco yo del lado mexicano. Ustedes ya conocen cómo funcionan todos los estímulos que tiene el IMCINE en sitio y saben más o menos cómo funciona nuestra industria. Un poco la información que les está trayendo Aarón tiene que ver con cómo poder mejorar la capacidad de plantear planes de financiamiento para sus películas, cómo pueden empezar a financiar las películas o empezar a obtener mejor capacidad de monetarizar los productos que ustedes están haciendo. Lo pueden monetarizar ya sea desde el plan de financiamiento para que puedan ofrecer pedazos de la película y puedan plantear que no les cueste tanto su departamento de props o su departamento de vestuario o su departamento de vehículos de acción o su departamento de transporte o su departamento de hoteles si es que van a estar filmando fuera del sitio en el que ustedes están basados, en el que tienen basada su producción, porque ya hay mucha producción que se está haciendo fuera de la Ciudad de México, y con eso también poder atraer a algunos inversionistas para quizá poderlos hacer que se vuelvan inversionistas a través de el estímulo fiscal. El estímulo fiscal prevé que no se pueda utilizar directamente como una contraprestación, pero sí pueden ahí desdoblarlo en cadenas de marketing asociado, como les explicaban ahora al final, para que su producto después conecte con el producto del inversionista que se involucró con su película. Esto es, que ustedes puedan después la película montarla en uno de estos sitios que lleva las listas de los productos que aparecen en la película y esos productos puedan después beneficiarse y beneficiar al productor también con las ventas asociadas de los productos que están asociados a las películas. Evidentemente, no todas las películas que reciben estos beneficios dentro del mercado mexicano se pueden beneficiar, pero sí de lo que se trata es de que algunas de las películas puedan empezar a buscar este tipo de apoyos y puedan empezar a pensar de esa manera y a pensar y acercarse a este tipo de financiación y a pensar desde un inicio. De nuevo, lo más complicado es encontrarte con que ya que tienes la película terminada, tienes 4 apariciones de una botella de Coca-Cola en primer plano en la mano y tienes a la Coca-Cola demandándote porque no obtuviste las licencias adecuadas en el momento adecuado. Esa es la peor de las condiciones posibles. ¿Qué es lo mejor que puedes hacer? Pues pensarlo desde un principio y tratar, primero, de obtener lo que puedas obtener de beneficios anticipadamente. Y 2, si no los puedes obtener, pues sacarlos de no regalarles publicidad, por decirlo de alguna manera, sino tratárselas de vender, ¿no? Entonces el truco, un poco lo que viene a contarles Aarón, es que hay maneras, hay muchas formas de poder integrar en diferentes tipos y en diferentes calidades a quienes tienen estrategias de marketing para sus productos, pero de lo que se trata es de poderlos ver desde un principio y de tenerlos y de estarlos pensando todo el tiempo, no de pensarlos, como solución final, como, híjole, ya me metí en todos los problemas del mundo, ahora voy a inventar una escena en la que voy a poner a alguien que sale con una botella de Coca-Cola, porque primero eso pues, no le sirve a la película creativamente, 2, nadie te lo va a comprar, ningún director de marketing va a aceptar eso en tu película, 3, ningún fondo público te lo va a permitir, ¿no? Y justo de lo que se trata es de que respetemos pues, la integridad creativa de nuestras películas. Entonces, si lo vamos concibiendo desde un inicio y vamos aprendiendo como las diferentes estrategias y los diferentes niveles y los diferentes momentos en los que podemos integrar los productos en nuestras películas, podemos trabajar de esa manera. A mí me resulta muy interesante y me abre mucho los ojos ver cómo, por ejemplo, se pueden utilizar estrategias para que los productos hablen de nuestras películas y los productos lancen nuestras películas. O ahora ya no solamente nuestras películas, también nuestras series de televisión, porque muchos de los productores que ya han producido 2, 3, 4 películas, de los productores mexicanos, están empezando a producir series de televisión y están empezando a producir telenovela en algunos casos. Bueno, pues ahí también empieza a haber ya la posibilidad de pensar en engranar esta integración de producto e integrarla, que el productor sea el que la integre, que no te la integren, que no te la manden desde el financiero, desde arriba y te digan, mañana tiene que haber en tu guión un producto que te estoy mandando y lo tienes que poner a como de lugar, sino que seas tú proactivamente quien lo está integrando y sepas en dónde lo vas a meter, cómo lo vas a meter, ¿no? Y eso hace que pues, sea menos desagradable para nosotros el integrarlo también, porque a final de cuentas, pues también lo más importante para uno como productor y para uno como profesional de la industria de producción, pues tiene que ser mantener la integridad creativa de nuestros productos, ¿no? Entonces un poco es como lo que tenemos que cuidar, porque al final también la gente se cansa, ¿no? Un poco y terminan cambiándoles y se dan cuenta todo el tiempo de que nos están vendiendo un producto, pues terminan por cambiarle. Pero bueno, eso es un poco lo que yo les tenía que decir al respecto. Y continuamos entonces ya con el resto de la presentación de Aarón.
Working again? So ultimately the key thing actually, just to reinforce what Hugo was saying there, was start early. Start early and start thinking about what you're going to do within your process. Look at it when you're still in a development phase. Look at what gets integrated, what partnerships you can create. Start thinking about those elements to really think early. So just to wrap up, the final thing that I really want to touch on is, where do you go to from here? How do you start? As I said, start early. But ultimately, you can go out and you can do this by yourself. Right? You can go out and you can start to pitch your ideas to brands. You can do that research your brands and so forth. One thing I would counsel you on is to potentially look at some agencies that do that. Right? Look at agencies, because the agencies have an existing understanding of brands and the way brands work. They're able to help you shape that communication to brands. They help you target which brands are the right ones for the film and so forth. The one thing I say about working with agencies is make sure it's the right one for you. All right? Don't just ring up one and stick with that one. hunt around, find the ones that work the best for you. Likewise, to reinforce what Hugo said, look for legal counsel on this. It's better to get it up front than to get it at the back, because brands can be very aggressive and brands teams can be very aggressive when it comes to legal action at the back end if you're representing their brand in the wrong way and you haven't checked this off earlier. So that's really the conclusion of today. I hope there's been some value that you can take away from that in your thinking and what you're doing with your productions, how you go about organizing and working towards brand relationships. Hugo and I would like to, I suppose, open it up to any questions that you guys might have, challenge us and see if you can.
Wait for the mic, please, because...
My question was, how many months in advance or how many months of preparation do you need to try to get a product to get on board on a project?
So that's a really good question, and the answer is how long's a piece of string. But let me give you some insights into why it's that way. It really boils down to what is the type of product, what's the type of film, and I'll give you a couple of working examples, and also what's the type of brand that you're going to bring on board. If you're looking at talking to smaller brands, and that's probably where you'll start, to be quite frank, the time frame will be dependent on the type of product. So take an example where somebody is wearing a necklace in a film, and you've decided, and your production team has decided that you want to have something specifically designed. The design process for a necklace roughly runs 3 to 6 months. So think about that in your process. If you want to take something off the shelf, you can probably go down there and start to negotiate and communicate with that person. If they're going to give it to you for free, you can turn that around in a week. All right? So it really does depend on the situation of what you're trying to achieve. Now, let's talk about bigger brands. If you're going to a bigger brand, give yourself more time. One of the biggest restrictions with big brands today is what they term their budget release cycle, meaning that if you're going to seek money from them, they're going to be releasing and determining what they spend on Q3 money now. So if you go to them now to talk about you're shooting your film in May, you're going to be very lucky to find a brand that even has any money because they've already assigned through the Q1 planning what they're doing in Q3. Okay? So it's, again, it doesn't give you a direct answer, but it'll give you direction that it varies upon your situation.
I'm from Colombia, and our box office is not that good, and the films don't play overseas also. So, do you have experience selling maybe a film based on what's going to be in festivals? If it's going to be a good film, or it's going to play all over the world, only in festival circuits, so it wouldn't be a money thing for the brand.
No, it can be. Again, that comes back to how you package it. So, the film Gascoigne that we worked on about the footballer, it was screened once in cinemas. Right? But it was screened once as a satellite event. So I think it was June 16th. They had a red carpet premiere and they screened at about 20 other screens around the country in the United Kingdom. They made an event out of it that was able to say to brands, come along and partner with us at the event within that structure. So it's where you need to think creatively how you bring a partnership brand on. It doesn't have to be in the film. Now, to your point, with festival circuits are a great one. If you can start getting into the festival circuit, you're going to be at the festival circuit communicating about your film. Okay? You're probably going to give, like a lot of producers do, give postcards out. Okay? Put the brand on the postcard. Give the brand tickets to the screening. Give the brand the opportunity for them to surround your participation at a festival if you get accepted. So it's about having an ongoing dialogue with them and knowing, in many respects, what the value is that you can provide to them, right? Don't go there and say to them, I'm going to give away too much and give away your value, but also don't go there and over-promise your value, right? Don't go and say, I'm going to win the Palme d'Or at Cannes, right, with your film, right? Because the brands will go, great, we'll give you money. And then when you don't, you get a legal letter from them to say, why didn't you win? So just be careful, but think about, it doesn't have to be based on box office. It's based upon reach, and that's where things like the social talent that we talked about, if you bring social talent on that has 25 million people, that's probably more that you get a box office release anyway. Right? So if you can communicate that to the brand, then that's the extra value that you can build around it.
want to tell a story about product placement. We were showing a Puerto Rican film in Colombia, the Cartagena Festival. One of the scenes, at a restaurant, one of the characters brings out a Visa card of Banco Popular from Puerto Rico. We could hear that some people in the audience laugh, oh, so Banco Popular. We didn't know why. After the film finished and we went out on the street, we passed a building that said Banco Popular of Colombia. So there's a lesson there that Banco Popular of Colombia got a plug in a Puerto Rican film that featured, that had the Banco Popular from Puerto Rico, and that it doesn't have anything to do with Banco Popular of Colombia. So the lesson I think it is that when we do our local independent films, we might be featuring a local product that maybe, like in this case, there's another company with a product with similar name that when that film is shown abroad can also get into the bandwagon of that film.
Mm-hmm. So let me turn that around for you. This is the marketing man in me, right? You've got an audience that's all of a sudden talking about a product that's not relevant to them in the film, right? Why can't you take that and then amplify that and say, hey, you know what, we had a bit of fun at the Puerto Rican or the Colombian Film Festival because our brand isn't, or the brand partner that we had on board wasn't involved, and you can get a little bit of a momentum around it. It brings attention to your film. The ultimate goal that you want to have out of any brand partnership is the attention that you can bring to your film. And if you can get that and amplify even a negative situation, right, and brands are very good at doing that, it may work in your favor. But it does also come back to that point that I made earlier, which is think cross borders. And when you start early and you're looking at where you're potentially going to take this, if there is a red flag like that you want to avoid, if you're thinking early and you're thinking through that, then you're doing your research. My early days as a marketer, I worked with Toyota. Toyota came out with in Australia at least, a car I think called the Prado, or Prego or something like that. And in one country around the world, that meant it was actually very derogative for men about their gender. And it didn't sell at all because they'd chosen the wrong brand name for the product on a vehicle that is very much a male-driven vehicle. So it is important to understand where you're taking this, what you're going to communicate. So, but again, try and take any negative instance and turn it into a positive one. Okay?
No hay más preguntas? No more questions? Well, thank you very much, Aaron. We learned a lot. I hope we all did, and I hope you enjoy your stay in Guadalajara.
I'm absolutely loving it here so far. So thank you for having me, and thanks for everybody who attended today. If you do have any other questions that crop up, I'll be around. Hunt me out. You can ask me a question on Twitter. The company's called Imaginative Exposure, which you saw at the beginning. Happy to engage with anybody on anything, any questions or thoughts that you might have. Okay? Thank you.